And we want everyone to know this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. This is an American thing. This is about security. The number one responsibility we have as legislators and as elected officials, whether you're a councilman or a congressman, is to keep your people safe. And this is an issue that we need to address to keep our people safe. It's time for a change, and we need that change to happen in the United States. And it starts with getting Mitch McConnell to pass this and rebuilding trust.
That was Congressman and presidential candidate Tim Ryan out today leading a caravan from Ohio to Kentucky with a message for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Do something. McConnell has ignored calls from Democrats to bring the Senate back from its August recess to vote on two bills that would strengthen the federal background check system for gun purchases. Without any pressure from Trump, action from McConnell is unlikely. And according to the Washington Post, the president has someone else in his ear who doesn't want the bills to pass. Quote, NRA Chief Executive Wayne LaPierre spoke with Trump on Tuesday after the president expressed support for a background check bill and told him it would not be popular among Trump's supporters. Charlie and the table are back. What do you think?
Look, the Senate is a firewall for the NRA. Because of the structure of the Senate, the votes of gun owners and gun enthusiasts have kind of more weight in the Senate than those of people who are clamoring for gun control. On the other hand, I do think it's nice Wayne LaPierre could take some time from buying suits and shopping for mansions to call the president on an issue. But I think we're past the point at which gun control is actually a dangerous issue for Democrats.
Yeah.
I think Republicans have milked almost all the seats they can get out of that issue. In '94, when the assault weapons ban passed, the Democratic Party was a lot more rural and southern and centrist. It is now more suburban and liberal and diverse. I'm not sure it's a winner for Democrats in a House election in every district, but it's no longer a thing that can't be touched if you're a Democrat.
Charlie Sykes, can you please explain?
Yeah.
I've had some conversations this week. People have asked me, why are Republicans AWOL on guns? Why is it not even debated? And I talked to two congressional reporters today. I said, am I missing any of this? Is there a big, is there a bunch of friction that's happening behind the scenes? And he said, absolutely not. Explain the Republican position on guns.
Yeah, believe it or not, it's not just the money from the NRA, and the public opinion polls, I don't think, fully capture the intensity of the power of the gun lobby. And I think what Republicans tell themselves is, look, this is part of our core constituency. In 2020, we can't afford to have any part of our base not be aroused and any part of our base be demoralized. And so we cannot be perceived to be weak on this. Now, look, the NRA is beset by scandal. It's weakened. Donald Trump probably could bring Republicans along if he switched. But, bottom line, Donald Trump feels, and I think a lot of Republicans feel, that he won in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in Michigan, and Wisconsin on the back of this gun issue, not because it's overwhelmingly popular, but because of the intensity of the feeling on the part of the base. And I don't think that there's going to be any movement on that whatsoever.
So to me, that analysis, I think, explains why Republicans are intractable on the issue of guns. But I think the political overlay is it speaks to Trump's weakness. Trump is so afraid of his base. He can't lose a single white supremacist in this country, so he can't condemn the manifesto from the killer. He can't lose a single gun owner in this country, so he can't stomp a stiletto into Wayne LaPierre's weak, greedy little, political scandal. I mean, it speaks to Donald Trump's extraordinary political weakness. He's a hostage of the most extreme parts of the Republican base, Rick.
White supremacist vote,
exactly
too.
Right.
That could be their slogan. I mean, I do think there will come a time and there will be a tipping point on this because we do know what has to be done about guns with universal background checks.
Of course we do. Everybody does.
And it will switch just the way sort of gay marriage switched and suddenly there will be a consensus around it. But not until then, of course. And there's that terrific Time cover. Because
Explain that to anyone in the car. What's the cover?
It's all the words associated with gun violence, and in that little, I was there today actually. So, and in the little red box, it's just what we have to take action against guns. But the problem is, as you say, his base is small, it's vanishing, it's ephemeral, and if he doesn't do the dog whistle, the loud dog whistle in favor of against gun reform, then he's afraid of losing those votes. I don't think it's about gun voters in particular, but it's about sending those messages to those white voters that, hey, you're on our side.
Karine, if I were a Democrat running for president and I knew that the way to bother Trump, the way to get him to send angry tweets from aboard Air Force One, flying from one grieving community to another, is to call him weak, to call him afraid, and to threaten him politically, because it's really all that he cares about. And we have proof point after proof point that he is politically terrified.
He is politically terrified, and you're right. He's stuck in this kind of corner because of all the people who are around him who are pushing NRA, the NRA president. And it's so funny because he took the NRA president's call, but he didn't take Congresswoman Veronica Escobar's call. Like, we know exactly where he stands. This is the same organization that gave him $30 million in his presidential election. But the thing is, just to take it out of politics for a second, people are going to die. People are going to die. They need to do something. Mitch McConnell needs to move. How many more kids have to die? How many churchgoers have to die? How many people who go to the club have to die? How much more blood do we need to see before they act? It's not going to end, unfortunately, with what we saw this past weekend. It is going to continue, and the blood is going to be on their hands if they do not act. And we can move forward with a background check. That's easy. There's a bill that came out of the House that Mitch McConnell just has to move forward with it. Just one step. And that's the sad part. Just taking all the politics out of it. People are going to continue to die.
Charlie Sykes, let me give you the last word. I hear you mm-hmm-ing.
Well, you know, I do think that, you know, on this topic and our previous topic, a lot of Republicans are realizing that the price tag for their Faustian bargain is coming due. You know, a couple of weeks ago, they were telling one another, you know, by playing these dog whistles and going after the squad, we're really sending the message to our base, and this is actually going to work for us. And now they're realizing, oh, my goodness, by doing this, we are alienating this broad swath of voters. We're going to be absolutely wiped out in the suburbs of the states that we think that we need to win. And I do think, but I think they're trapped. I do think they're trapped. They are afraid to move away from the base. And as a result of this, they're finding out exactly what the consequences are for this deal they made. Let's go along. Let's keep our heads down. Let's enable. Let's rationalize Donald Trump. And now they're stuck with all of this.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.